What's going on, everybody? Welcome into this members-only edition of Pack-A-Day Live or Pack-A-Day members-only Q&A, whatever we want to call it. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you guys being members and excited to jump into all of your incredibly amazing questions, which are A+ every single time, I swear. You guys always bring unbelievably amazing questions and just allow me to kind of think about what we kind of want to go over, and obviously all the great hopefully answers I have to your questions, but you guys always keep me on my toes, so I appreciate that. Let's jump in right away. Should have about 45 minutes to an hour here to answer as many questions as possible, so we shall get started right away. Ethan, how did Carrington Valentine play? Seen tons of snaps, didn't get a feel for the quality of play though. Thanks in advance for doing these Q&As. Ethan, I will cover this in much more detail on the grades chat. I'll definitely make him a player of interest regardless of whether he grades high or low or not. I have not got the defense yet. I have finished up my offensive grades for the week. I finished those up yesterday. As soon as we are done here, I will finish up grading the defense, just get into grading the defense and finish grading the defense. So hopefully should have that done by end of day today. That grades video should probably go up tomorrow, I would assume in the afternoon. So keep an eye out for that there. I'm not trying to dodge your question or not answer it. I know you got in early and made sure to get this one in. So I know Justice Mosqueda went over it in pretty great detail in today's show, and he had the opportunity to view it a little bit. So definitely check that out. He was very encouraged by the play overall, statistically, analytically. He looks really, really good, from what he's done on the field so far this season, albeit in a small sample size. I know from a PFF standpoint, he had a slight negative grade in this one. I'm encouraged overall by just the fact that he's above Eric Stokes at this point in time. But I'll go into it in much greater detail when we get to the grades later this week, and just once I've had the opportunity to watch the all 22 on defense. John, I appreciate you, man. So thank you so much to you and to everyone that's here, and I'm glad that you're enjoying them. Rasheed Walker has so much trouble in the run game, but is very good pass blocking. Why do you have his PFF run pass block grade? I don't think he's that bad as a run blocker, to be honest, but give me a second here. I can pull up. Rasheed Walker. There he is. All right. Offense. So so for PFF, it is definitely a discrepancy. He's got an 81.2 pass block grade, a 44.4 run block grade. So a pretty significant difference there. I don't chart the difference between run and pass, so it's just a negative or a positive on every single play. There's only so much when it comes to time that I have the ability to do. Just going through and grading every single player and every single play is crazy enough already, and just kind of getting through all of that. So I haven't ever broken it down from run and pass difference or anything like that. For me, just my own two eyes, I don't think he's a great run blocker by any means, but I don't think like he's this massively deficient run blocker either. I think in general, if we're just speaking overall to the Packers offensive line, in general, they're a much better pass protection offensive line than they are a run blocking offensive line. Like to a T, Sean Ryan is probably the only one that I would argue is probably a better run blocker than he is a pass protector. But if you look at it, I would say more often than not, I feel really good about the pass protection and that Jordan Love is going to have time to throw the ball. Like they do a pretty damn tremendous job, all things considered, when it comes to pass pro, and one of the best offensive lines in the league in pass protection. From a run blocking standpoint, more often than not, the run yards gained are due to one of two things: the running back doing something special, or a schemed up run that allows the offensive line to not have to do too much heavy lifting in the run game. You just don't have people movers along that line. Again, the one maybe exception is Sean Ryan, who does have the ability to move some people from time to time. But outside of that, Zach Tom, is amazing as he is, not a people mover. Josh Myers' deficiency is certainly run blocking. Elton Jenkins is a fine, solid run blocker. No major issues there. But again, he's not this big physical mauling player either. And then Rasheed Walker, sort of same thing. He's more of that finesse pass protection offensive tackle where, again, I wouldn't say it's like brutal by any means, but I do think there's some things that he can do to improve as a run blocker. So I think it's more of a general philosophy. They like quick, agile, fleet-footed offensive linemen that are going to be really good in pass pro, and then they're going to go in more of like a zone blocking scheme. Hopefully they can hit their landmarks and seal off more than, again, move people. But I don't have a major issue. I think Rasheed's been much better as of late. I think he's a good offensive lineman. I think they're lucky to have him at left tackle. Looking at the red zone woes this year, what percentage is play calling, offensive line play, Jordan's execution, wide receiver execution? John, I can't. I'd have to go back and look at every red zone play, right, to like really dig deep into that. I went and watched every red zone play this past week. The first thing I will note is that this is the Packers have been worse than most teams, right? I'll very clearly say that they're at the bottom of the league in red zone efficiency. So I'm not trying to make it any sort of overarching excuse here, but in general, red zone offense has been tougher in the season as a whole this year. Red zone defenses have gotten much better. I do think when it comes to the red zone, you have to be able to run the football. And when you talk about being able to move people in the run game, it becomes a lot more important when you're down in the red area. Like if you can't move people, if you can't get those creases, it's going to be very hard to generate any sort of push. And if you can't get push, it's going to be hard to just generate good run opportunities because everything is so condensed. And passing in the red zone is really, really tough because everything is so condensed. So it's not an easy area. I mean, you're talking already about, when you have the full length of the field, how hard it is and how difficult defenses are making it for you. Now imagine cramming that into like a, 15 to 20 yard space, right? Just condenses down. I mean, you talk about how fast these players are and how aggressive and how physical. Now you put that into you're just talking like a bunch of collisions and chaos. And it's really, really difficult to kind of make things happen. I don't think the play calling has been atrocious. I went through and I like watched every single red zone play in this game. Didn't think it was anywhere near as bad as maybe the results ended up being. And remember, they did score 3 touchdowns, probably should have had 2 field goals, right? So, I think if they get out of this with 3 touchdowns and 2 field goals, you probably feel a lot different about the red zone offense for the day. A poor throw by Jordan and a missed 4th down opportunity because he kind of needed points at that time are probably the difference in how the ultimate difference in how we feel about the red zone offense in that game. But to me, it all needs to be a little bit better. I think they need to find a go-to guy in the red zone that gives some fear into defenses that maybe they got to double him or that he's going to be a problem, right? I think getting Luke Musgrave could help in the red zone for certain. And I think they have to be a little bit better with play calling. I think they need to be a little bit better with execution. I think it's a little bit of all of it. I don't think there's any one particular thing, but I'd have to go back and again, watch every sort of red zone play. And even like Justice said today, even if you go and watch every red zone play, like it's really difficult to tell because what they're going off of is certain tendencies by the defense. Do you get a tendency breaker? Do you get what you were expecting? Did you not get what you were expecting? And as he said, like there's a little bit of rock, paper, scissors with this, where you're kind of going back and forth and you're hoping that you pick rock when they pick scissors. And sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. So things that they need to clean up on and be better at. And regardless, like this should not be a bottom team when it comes to red zone efficiency, no question about it. So they're going to have to find some answers. And I think that will, get back to where it's supposed to be. They may not be the best team in the league, but I think it'll get back to middle of the road. And I mean, that's a good news for Green Bay because that means they're going to have probably a really great red zone efficiency coming up to get back to middle of the pack, which I do think they will. What about a big nose tackle to eat up blockers and free up the other 2 linemen? Yeah, I mean, that sounds good in theory, right? It's not quite that simple. And sorry, I keep getting something in my eye here, but it's not quite that simple. When it comes, first of all, it depends on scheme, right? This scheme with what Jeff Hafley wants is about penetration and getting up the field and not necessarily just eating blockers and having a linebacker run free, right? Also, it sounds good again in theory, but what you're seeing a lot of times is a double team at the point of attack on the first guy. And then you're seeing, the offensive lineman, one of the offensive linemen get to the second level and pick off the linebacker. So, or you're seeing a lot of duo where you're getting 2 double teams and you're trying to, get up the field that way. Either way, a lot of times you're getting a double team on that first guy, that nose tackle, trying to get him out of the picture and then, moving on from there. There's not a lot of great examples unless you're Dexter Lawrence, right? Who is a freak in and of himself and can also still penetrate. Well, like we're not in the Gilbert Brown, Pat Williams era anymore. It's not necessarily what you want. You have to be able to have athleticism. You have to be able to get up the field. I mean, they have a TJ Slayton, right? I mean, TJ Slayton is about as modern of a day nose tackle as you're going to get in this league. And they just don't play him all that much. And you have to think again, like how much does he actually do for you? He's 6'4", 330. I mean, 6'4", 330 in modern NFL that's about as Gilbert Brown, Pat Williams as it gets. So it's not just having a guy that's 6'4", 330. That in of itself does not solve any problems. You still have to be able to hold up at the point of attack, utilize leverage, get off of your blocks and go make plays. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter if you're 6'4", 370, like you have to be able to you actually get both of those blocks and, hold up at the point of attack. And so many times, even if you're like what you're seeing from offensive linemen is even if they can't move that guy's still getting to the second level and making plays on the linebacker. And then the running back's just running away from the 370-pound dude. So it's not quite that simple. What you want is not about a big nose tackle, right? What you want is a dominant run defender along that defensive line. Theoretically, you should have Kenny Clark and TJ Slayton when you're in obvious rundowns. Kenny Clark and TJ Slayton should be able to be those guys along the defensive front that, whether you want to call it eating up those blocks or just being good run defenders with, if you want to use an LVN and a Rashawn Gary or a couple of your bigger defensive ends, you should be able to create a pretty good wall with the defensive players that you have. And then it's up to the linebackers to go make plays, but you're still going to get offensive linemen at the second level. And at that point, if you're a Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, you've got to either find a way to avoid that and go make the play, or take that block on and go make the play. So it's not, again, quite that simple. It's just size. Size is not the solution here, unfortunately. You just got to get good players that are able to penetrate, get off of blocks, and go make plays. Right now, they don't have that at a high enough level. But also, I wouldn't say the run defense has been atrocious. I want to see what the stats are. Green Bay is allowing yards per carry. Green Bay is allowing 4.4 yards per carry, which might sound bad, but that's 13th in the league, tied for 13th. There's a few really good teams. The Ravens are at 3.4 yards per carry, which is crazy. Vikings at 3.6, Chiefs at 3.6, Broncos at 3.8. But then every other team outside of the top four is 4 yards per carry or better. So they're not really that far down. And my guess is, quite frankly, a lot of that, has been some quarterback rushing yards on some of those longer runs too. I feel like they haven't been terrible in run defense. Of all the things right now that I'm concerned about, defensively, run defense is not at the top of my list. I've actually thought they've done a pretty good job when it comes to run defense, not on the quarterback this week, but in general. I feel like Green Bay can and will be in every game they play moving forward because they play to the level of their opponent. Don't know if that's reassuring or scary. Maybe Ben, but like that didn't help them against the Lions, right? Like the Lions pretty much outplayed them for the good chunk of that game. And to your point, in some of these games, you would hope that it's not super competitive. You would hope that Green Bay can run away from some of these teams. To me, this is less to do about their opponent. And this is more about Green Bay playing their brand of football and playing just the way that they're capable of playing. And until you get that, right, it's just theoretical. It's just saying like, hey, I think Green Bay can be really good. Now that's great. I think so too. But until we see it consistently, they're just a wannabe really good team. I want to see this team be an actual really good team. I want to see them beat good football teams like Detroit and Minnesota. I want to see them run away from teams like Chicago. And I don't want to see these really close games that you should be pulling away from. And I don't want to see, games against Detroit that are, over before they start. Same thing, 28-0 to Minnesota. Like those things can't happen. So to me, this is less to do about the opponent and it is more to do with Green Bay, the team that they are, the team that they want to be, and continuing to get better the remainder of the season so they can go out and play better in all of their games, regardless of the style of opponent that they're playing. I did like the fewer drop passes, fewer penalties, and good decision-making from Love. Bad throw to Kraft, right decision, and steamroller Kraft probably scores on that play. If not scores, gets closer to the first, maybe gets the first down. If doesn't get the first down, probably a yard, maybe worst case scenario, 2 yards shy. And then you have an opportunity maybe to go for it if you want. But either way, just needs to be a better throw. And yes, I agree. There were some positives to take away, including the fewer drop penalties, poor passes, poor decisions, I should say, and penalties as well. Also, did you watch Buffalo KC game? Fun to see KC finally lose. Yeah, you could see that one coming. Buffalo is ultra motivated. KC has not been great this year. They've been undefeated, but they have not been great. I don't think they're at the level of what their record would indicate. I think they're going to have some tougher games coming up. I think there's some flaws within KC right now, but they're still a really good team. Buffalo definitely outplayed them. They were the better team. I think Buffalo has been the better team on the year, to be honest. And it showed in that game. I think right now, if there were a Buffalo KC playoff game, I'd be favoring Buffalo in that one. What changes would you make on the D line to increase success? I guess it depends on if you're asking me for this season or moving forward. I'm going to assume that you mean for this season. There's not a simple solution here, Box Boy. I wish there was. I wish there was this simple, yep, just do this and things are going to be better. This is not about scheme. This is not about who's lining up where. This is not about which guys that they're getting out on the field at which times. This is about the individual players being better at the end of the day. That's all it's about. Rashawn Gary, we have seen play much, and he's played better as of late. He hasn't been bad, but we've seen Rashawn Gary play much better football than he has this year. That's the Rashawn Gary that we need. The one pre-ACL, the one that was tearing through the league. That's the Rashawn Gary that we need. Kenny Clark, we have seen years and years and years. And yes, there's probably some regression here. And yes, he's getting older, but we've seen years of phenomenal play from Kenny Clark. That's the Kenny Clark that we need to see. We have seen flashes from TJ Slayton where he has the ability at times to play unbelievable football. And it's never been consistent, but we need something closer to that from TJ Slayton. We've seen Carl Brooks be a menace on the interior. We haven't seen that this year. We've seen LVN in small snippets, right, show some of that talent off. And regardless of what he's shown over the 2 years, like, we know that there is a talented player in there somewhere. It just has not shown itself as a NFL dominant defensive end. We need more from LVN. Kingsley Enagbare. I think for the most part, this probably is who Kingsley Enagbare is. It's not bad. He's a rotational number 4 defensive end that can help you in moments, right? But we've seen some good plays from Enagbare. You need to see a little bit more of those. Brenton Cox had some flashes this past week. Colby Wooden will flash here and there. It's not Devontae Wyatt. Devontae Wyatt, we've seen some good play out of. Like, it's not any scheme thing. It's not any of that, where they're lining up or who's starting in front of who. It's all of these guys playing to the level of their ability. And if you get that, at least even from a few of them, you feel much better about where that defensive line can be. If you do not get that, if they just continue to play like this, then it's broken. And there's no amount of different substitution or different lineup change or moving this guy to this spot. There's none of that that's going to work. For me, I would start trying some different things. I know that much. I think Rashawn's mostly in a good spot right now. I would continue to see what Brenton Cox has. I would play around a little bit more with Carl Brooks outside at defensive end, see if maybe he can do something a little bit different there. I want to see a little bit of Aaron Mosby a little bit more, see if there's something more that you can unlock with him. But Kenny and Devontae need to be able to be much better on the interior. And there's only so many, different formations and things that you can do to try to scheme those guys up. There's not enough twists and stunts, and offensive lines are going to know that that's coming. At the end of the day, you got to go out and beat the guy in front of you. Green Bay hasn't done that enough. And this is a technique and a want to thing more than anything else. And Jason Rebrovich needs to do a much better job with that entire group in the second half of the season. So happy to have been offered a gifted membership. Loving the content. How was Evan Williams' overall game Sunday from your eyes? Again, I haven't watched the defensive tape yet, so my apologies for that. I will get to that definitely in our grade segment tomorrow. I didn't think it was a great game from Evan at first glance. I can give you the PFF grade really quick, just to kind of at least satiate you for the time being. He had a 53.4 grade, which was his lowest grade of anything from PFF on the season so far. So they had a really poor run defense grade on him, a bad tackling grade on him, and a slightly above average coverage grade on him. So again, I'll have to go back and watch it closer on the All-22. Again, I'll get to defensive All-22 as soon as we are done here. So we'll definitely get to that. But I can't say it to you with any confidence, without going and watching it. So we'll get there. I promise. Do you think the new offensive coordinator, play caller for the Bears had anything to do with the Packers not being able to get a stop? Yes and no. I think it helped Chicago. I think they definitely brought some new schemes and new ideas to the table. I think they utilized Caleb Williams more as a runner, which we heard from the Packers after the game they were not expecting. They didn't expect to see sort of the read options and things like that. So I think there was definitely some unscouted stuff and some things that Chicago did that Green Bay was not expecting. I think they could have probably done a better job of preparing for that and expecting it a little bit more, to be quite honest. But my guess is, unless Chicago can continue to reinvent itself every week, every other team is now going to benefit from seeing what Thomas Brown did in the first week against Green Bay and probably have a much better plan of attack moving forward. So I think on one hand, Green Bay was a little bit unlucky in having that first game against Thomas Brown. I think if it was anything after that, they probably would have had a much better feel for what Chicago was going to try to do in his regime, in his era. But I still think there was a lot of stuff that they could have done better to sort of stop it and shut it down. And they didn't do that well enough. And partly it was on Halfley, part of it was on the players, but it just needed to be better. It wasn't good enough, but I do think it played a part in it, but it's not a full excuse by any means either. Take off the hat, bring back the mustache, and pierce your septum. Trying to think what the appropriate amount of super chats would be for that. Like what the gift would have to be. I'm thinking probably somewhere in like the $1,000 range to do like a permanent hat ban plus bring the mustache back full time, plus pierce the septum. I mean, it would have to be, it's probably more than 1,000. Probably have to be something way more than that. I don't know. Maybe I'll put a challenge out there if we get certain things, or maybe we'll figure out maybe something at some point. But I know you're saying it in jest, but those would be fun things to put out there, to raise some money or do something, but we'll see. Ain't easy being cheesy. Have you noticed a decline in the quick throw slants? It would be nice to see them get Reed and Watson the ball and let them use that speed. Yeah, I think defenses are partially taking that away. I think partially you're seeing the NFL go away from that a little bit more. What we're seeing a lot of in the NFL right now, and specifically against Green Bay, and part of the things that are going against the Packers pass rush and why other teams are having trouble with pass rush at times too, you are seeing 3-man routes with the tight end and the running back utilizing chips on the 2 defensive ends a ton. And I mean a ton. So you're seeing chips from those guys, and then they're going to go out into the flat or make a play after that, or you're going to see the 2 guys go out, one guy blocking for the other one. Like you're just seeing so many different variations of guys chipping from the backfield with a lot of 3-man routes. And when you get a 3-man route, it's really easy to cover some of the quick stuff, right? So a lot of the 3-man routes are some more longer developing stuff. And then you're going to have the checkdowns if you need them. Teams are more apt to give you the checkdowns. You're not allowing yourself to get that immediate pressure off the edge because those guys are getting chipped. It's helping everyone along the offensive line, and it's allowing your pass offense to really take place and you to kind of get through your progressions a little bit better and to challenge down the field a little bit more, trying to get some of those explosive plays. So right now that's in vogue. And until that changes, and unless something changes, I don't know how much of that we're going to get back. Now, I do think that there are ways, to get that offense going a little bit more, but I think it starts with running the ball early, getting that run game going. And then off of that, you can do some of those play action, quick passes, which you can get some of those slants on. And, teams are just still very, very cognizant of not allowing you to get some of those easy, quick, passes. As you can imagine, those are just, brutal for you because it's like a quick 3-step drop and all of a sudden they've got a 10-yard completion on a slant. Like teams do a great job of taking away that stuff. It's just a different, version of the NFL right now. We're seeing teams evolve and get better at stopping those sort of routes so that you don't have those easy throws on like a 3 or 5-step drop. And again, the way that the offenses have evolved to have the chips on the 2 outside players, it's a different modern NFL. And things will change, and that revolving door will figure itself out because now teams will take away the chips and stuff and the stuff longer down the field. And then you're going to have to reinvent your offense in a new way. And then slants will come back at some point. And like these things are all cyclical. So you'll see it more at some point. I think there's probably a little bit more that Green Bay can do with it. I do think that some of the mesh stuff and the bunch stuff and getting the ball in Watson and Reed's hands underneath, I think those are things that they can probably do a little bit better of a job of. But again, there's reasons that defenses are trying to take away that stuff too. Josh, am I crazy to think Keisean Nixon is a liability on defense? He seems to get beat often and not make big plays. Through most metrics, he's probably middle of the pack as a corner. Let me see if I can pull this up really quick. So his grade on defense so far has been a 56.8. Here's his target numbers per PFF. He's been targeted 44 times, 29 receptions, 65.9% completion percentage, which isn't that the percentage wise is not terrible. 263 yards given up, 9.1 yards per reception, not giving up much yards after the catch at all, which is a really good thing. And he's only given up a long of a 27-yard completion. He has given up 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has 3 pass breakups, 4 penalties. Quarterbacks when targeting him have a quarterback rating of 112.2. All right. So it's certainly very easily to say it's not been good enough. All right. Like that's, if you're allowing a QB rating of 112.2, yeah, it's a problem, right? It's not great. I don't think what you want with Keisean Nixon is a full-time outside corner or even just probably a full-time player. I don't think that is what he ultimately is meant to be. And we talked about this with Justice yesterday. To me, I think the best version of this defensive backfield is Carrington Valentine and Jair Alexander on the outsides with Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney at safety. And then you have a platoon with Keisean Nixon and Javon Bullard in the slot. In certain situations, Bullard might be better. Certain situations, Nixon might be better, but you can figure that out on the fly. If one of them's having a great game, if it's Nixon, keep playing Nixon. If it's Bullard, keep playing Bullard. If one of them's having a terrible game, well, then put that guy on the bench. Either way, I think that makes a little bit more sense. If teams are going a little bit more 12 personnel and you want to go nickel, probably bring in Bullard. Teams are going more 3 wides, 4 wides, and you want to play nickel, all right, go with Keisean Nixon. But I think that to me is the best version of this defensive backfield. We're clearly not quite there yet. I hope they get there. And I hope Carrington Valentine plays well enough that when he gets these opportunities, they can't take him off the field, right? I will stick by saying this, and I really truly mean this. If, and this is a big if Keisean Nixon is your 11th best player on defense, 10th or 11th, somewhere in that range, I think you're fine. I don't think that he is as much of a issue / problem as a lot of Packer fans think. Is it ideal? No. Is it quite good enough? Probably not. Most defenses aren't 11 strong that have just 11 really good players at all spots. In fact, I can tell you there are 0 defenses that go 11 strong and are really good with all 11. It just isn't going to happen. You're always going to have some guy that's getting picked on a little bit more. You're always going to be left wanting for an upgrade. It just doesn't exist. Every team would love to have an all-pro player at every single spot. It just doesn't exist. So to me, if Keisean's your 10th, 11th guy, you're fine. It's not a big deal. Would you continue to look to upgrade the position? Absolutely. Would I like to see more Carrington Valentine? Absolutely. But I don't think it's, again, to the point where they just can't win with him. The issue is that I don't know that Keisean's the 11th guy. You've got some, Quay Walker that's not playing well. You've got some defensive linemen that are not, playing up to their capabilities. So that becomes a bigger issue. And if you've got Jair Alexander out, then you've got some other moving parts in the secondary and defensive backfield. So he becomes, I think, a much bigger player than what he's supposed to be. In an ideal world, I think he's probably like your 6th defensive back playing in a dime role. And again, maybe platooning a little bit in nickel. And I think that's probably a better spot for him. Having to play him every snap and mix and match him outside and inside. That's not ideal. I'll say one more time, I don't think it's a liability to the fact that you can't win with it. There's a lot of stuff from a run defense standpoint that he does a good job on. He's a good blitzer when they want to blitz him. Like the yards after catch are limited because he gets his guy to the ground right away. There's worse things that could be out there than Keisean Nixon, I promise you. But yes, you would love to upgrade it. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. He's not great, but average. And if you're giving me a choice between him and Stokes on the perimeter, probably taking him 1,000,000%. No question about it. 5 and 6 seeds will be favorites in the playoffs, West and South. 7 goes to Philly or Detroit. Got to stay ahead of Washington. Yeah, that 7 spot is going to be a tough spot because, probably going into a very, very tough game, probably into Philly. But if Detroit has a couple slip-up games against Green Bay and or Minnesota and gets to 3 losses and Philly plays really well the rest of the way, it's not impossible that Philly could get the 1 and Detroit could get the 2. Then all of a sudden, if you're the 7, you could be going to Detroit early on too. So you definitely want to be in a position where you're not playing one of those top teams in the 7 seed. So getting the 5 or the 6 could be absolutely huge for Green Bay. Games against San Francisco, Detroit. I mean, all of them, all the remaining games are going to be massively important. Got to pick up your wins where you can. Jay Western, good to see you, my friend. It would feel great to give San Francisco an uphill battle for the playoffs this weekend. Don't give them oxygen. Don't give them oxygen. You have the ability to basically knock them out for the most part right now. Let's do it. Let's absolutely do it. I don't want to see them in the playoffs. I don't want to see any piece of the San Francisco 49ers in the playoffs. I want to see them dead in week 12. Just bury them right now when you have the chance. You give them life, you never know what's going to happen. And all of a sudden, by the way, even if Green Bay goes on a run and maybe gets like the 5 seed, if San Francisco wins this game and they get going the rest of the year, they could be the 4 seed. And all of a sudden, before you know it, guess what? You're playing San Fran in Santa Clara week 1 in the playoffs. Doesn't sound like fun. Does not sound like fun. Do not sign me up for that. I don't want it. So finish them now while you have the chance. I'm not great at it either, Ben. I understand. What's your take on the 2-point play? That was the must-win play Matt LaFleur picked when we were at joint practice together. They ran that quick out with Kraft like 4 times and scored on Baltimore. Where's that? Yeah, so the statistics right now and the analytics will tell you that teams are actually having more success running the football on 2-point plays than passing the football. All right, so I think if you look at it like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it is statistically advantageous to run on 2-point plays more than it is to pass. You're successful more often running the ball. It may not feel, intuitive that way. It may feel like a pass is the better play because you have the ability to pass, or maybe you could run it in on a scramble. But statistically, run plays have worked better. I'm sure that maybe to some extent played a part in that. I think part of the thing that makes running the ball a little bit more advantageous in those areas is when it's unexpected. when you're maybe going 4 wides and they're spreading it out and showing that you're going to throw the ball. And then all of a sudden you run the ball, right? And teams aren't expecting it as much. This had a very run heavy look to it. It never really had any real glimpse of like, oh, they might pass on this play. I think maybe there was some read option element of this where maybe Jordan could have kept it, but they had that covered too. I mean, Chicago was just all over it. And the look was terrible. I don't know if Jordan had any sort of check call to maybe get out of that, but it was just wasn't there. I agree. I don't like the play call. I don't like the creativity on the play. It was completely demolished by Chicago. And, you know, you also have to remember, like, you might look at it and say, hey, statistically, run plays have worked better than pass plays. You also have to know your offense. Again, we talked about it. Green Bay's not this mauling offensive line up front. So getting 2 yards on a must-have play, on a run play where it looks like a run play and it looks like they're expecting a run play, it's probably not going to end well for you. So I probably needed to be a lot better in that situation. That was definitely one of those red zone calls that I did not like in this game whatsoever. Why have they not used Ford at all? Jonathan Ford? Again, like, what I will say here is size doesn't always matter. All right. Jonathan Ford's a big dude. He made some plays in camp. He's not that good of a defender. If he were, teams would be claiming him. Teams would be picking him up. He's on a practice squad. He got released off of IR. I get Green Bay's giving him a 3-year window here, basically redshirt year after redshirt year after redshirt year. They clearly like him as like the 55th, 56th guy on their team, right? But every single one of those guys on the defensive line are better than Jonathan Ford. Like, there's nothing that I have ever seen on his college tape or in training camp or in preseason that would make me believe, yep, that's going to be an upgrade. You want to know the crazy thing about Jonathan Ford, this big behemoth defensive tackle? Let me just bring this up really quick because I want to see his size here. He is 6'5", 338. All right, so 6'5", 338. And my guess is he was a little bit actually bigger than that in college. My guess he was probably in that 340 range in college. Here's the truth. In college, they did not play him on red zone situations and in like 3rd and 4th and short. The reason being was because he played with terrible pad level. He would get moved off the ball every single time because he was too upright. So just because you're big and, you know, like whether it's a height thing or a weight thing does not mean that you're a good run defender. In fact, a lot of times, if you're playing too high, you're just going to get out leveraged. And it doesn't matter if the other guy's smaller than you. Those guys are big, tough, physical dudes on the offensive line too. So they didn't even use him a lot of times. That was one of my first things I noted in my scouting report of him after breaking down his tape once Green Bay selected him was he did not get used in short yardage situations because they didn't trust him because he wasn't good enough at it. So I'm not saying he can't be a player that, like, in a pinch, if some of your guys go down, that you could use, like having him as a like emergency 6th defensive tackle is somebody that can go in if you need him. That's awesome. I love that he's on the practice squad. I think he's more than worthy of being that guy. I think if you need him for 10, 15 snaps a game as a guy because you've got some injuries, I think he can fill in adequately. I really do. But I don't think he's better than anyone that's on the team. And I don't think he's going to help their run defense in any significant sort of way. I think he will survive it, if nothing else. And sometimes that's what you need on your practice squad is guys you can survive with, probably not guys you can win because of, right? And that's where I kind of put Jonathan Ford right now. Personally, I'm more than okay if Gooch just signs edge rushers instead of drafting them based on his history. Needs to be better, right? I think, you know, even Devontae Wyatt on the interior, he needs to be better at drafting that front, you know, defensive end / defensive tackle group. I am going to be intrigued if they're willing to maybe take some different types of players along the defensive line now that you're in Jeff Hafley's system. You know, he's been drafting for different style of defenses in Mike Pettin and in Joe Barry's eras where they wanted bigger, more physical guys along the defensive, both the edge and the interior. It's not necessarily the case with Jeff Hafley. So I'm interested to see if that changes up a little bit, but regardless of what style of players they want, they have to do better at drafting players that can come in and do better right away and not be these project players. And it's one thing too, if you're a project player, like I don't think anyone's going to be massively upset if LVN is a, you know, Pro Bowl caliber player next year, right? If he has 2 years where he's not good, but by next year he's playing almost at a Pro Bowl level, cool. Sign me up. I'll take that. I will take the 2 redshirt seasons if it means he's going to be playing awesome by year 3. There are no signs or indications right now that LVN is going to be playing well by year 3. Devontae Wyatt is not playing well by year 3. Quay Walker is not playing well by year 3. Like it's one thing if you want to do some draft and develop, awesome. But you like the develop is a big piece of that. They have to grow. And if you're not in a situation where these guys are growing, whatever the reason may be, you need to fill that disconnect. Either A, you have to recognize as a GM, oh, we don't have the coaches that can develop these guys, or just the time isn't the same with the change in CBA and the lack of practice time where the develop part is kind of dead. And I've made that argument in the past. I think Goody, to some extent, has proven me wrong, mostly due to Jordan Love and some of the work that he's done in the later rounds of the draft. I think Tucker Kraft is a great example of a player that has been able to develop in Green Bay. Jaden Reed continues to get better. I think Rasheed Walker is a phenomenal example, right? So it's not like they haven't drafted and developed, but the first round has been a pretty big nightmare. I was talking to my friend earlier today online, and I just said, if Green Bay does not reach their potential this season, if it's another disappointing January letdown, the first round picks over the last 4 or 5 years will be the reason why. Like, he's done everything else almost unbelievably in a lot of different ways. Late round picks, finding guys off the street, unrestricted free agency, practice squad pickups. Like, we're not talking about a GM that's bad at many things here, right? He has done a phenomenal job in almost every aspect of being a GM, except the first round lately. And if you go, like, if we, again, get to January and this team is not getting to the level that they want, not getting to a Super Bowl, first round pick Eric Stokes, first round pick Quay Walker, first round pick Devontae Wyatt, first round pick LVN, first round pick Jordan Morgan will be a huge reason why. And that's not to say, by the way, that especially guys like Jordan Morgan and LVN can't get better in the next couple seasons, right? Especially Jordan Morgan, like, his career is just getting started. That's not to say that Morgan can't be a great offensive lineman in this league. Like, time will tell. We're still a far way away from having any sort of real legitimate judgment on Jordan Morgan one way or the other. But as of right now, this season, what you want from ROI on those picks, you are not even close to getting. I mean, not even remotely close. I mean, Stokes is basically completely out of the rotation. Quay probably should be completely out of the rotation. Devontae's not making any significant impact. LVN's down to about 20 snaps per game, and he's not making an impact on those. Obviously, Jordan Morgan is hurt right now. Like, that will be the reason. That will absolutely be the reason. If Green Bay is not able to reach their potential, it will be because of that, more than anything else, in my opinion. So, yeah, you would, like, he's made up for it in a lot of ways. Like, when you're able to get a Rasheed Walker in the 7th round, a Zach Tom in the 5th round, a Sean Ryan in the 3rd round, Tucker Kraft in the 3rd round, a Jaden Reed in the 2nd round, Romeo Doubs in the 4th round. Like, we can go on and on, right? Like, when you're able to do those things, you can make up for it very, very easily. But it's really, really difficult to overcome 5 first round picks that are just nowhere near where you need them to be. That's a tough thing to overcome. So definitely need to find a way to be better there. Was the game as bad as it looked after a rewatch? Seems hard to take much good away. Offensively, definitely not. Offensively, I thought they were fantastic outside of the red zone. And really then 3 out of 5 were touchdown finishes in the red zone. They had 2 bad red zone possessions. And that was really the only issue on offense. They had 1 drive that ended in a punt. That's going to happen. Like, you can't expect perfection, right? But, like, outside of that, I thought the offense actually had a really good day outside of 1 bad throw from Jordan and maybe a couple bad play calls in red zone on that other drive. Outside of that, I thought they were played really, really good football. Defense, I'll let you know in a couple days here as we break down the tape on defense, but I wish I had a better answer for that right now. Ask me some of these questions defensively. Pack-A-Day Live tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central Time. Ask me the exact same questions, and I promise you I'll have answers. Just tough to get to everything by noon on a Tuesday, right? I've had a lot of, you get just a lot of stuff going on. Radio hits, talking to Nagler for Cheesehead TV yesterday, doing the radio show in the morning, breaking down all the offensive tape already, putting the grades together for all of that. There's a lot that goes on in that first, and then rewatching the game. So there's a lot that goes on. So I'll get to, again, as soon as we're done here, we're going right into defensive tape, and I'll be able to speak a lot smarter about it in the next couple days. But offensively, it was much better than it looked live. That's for sure. Who would it be up to bench Quay or make a change there? Who would it be up to? I mean, I think that would be a collective decision, right? There's a multitude of ways that could go. The first thing is that, from a linebackers coach standpoint, right? I can't think of his name. Oh, that's going to bother me. I want to say Ogabasi, who's the defensive lines coach. Anthony Campanelli. There it is. Anthony Campanelli could go to Jeff Hafley and Matt LaFleur and say, hey guys, I'm in this linebacker room every single day. I'm coaching these guys, and I think it's time to go in a different direction. I think it's time for Eric Wilson. I think it's time for Isaiah McDuffie. I think it's time for Tyron Hopper. He could initiate that discussion, right? And say, we need a change here. And then Matt LaFleur and Jeff Hafley could say no. They could say, nope, we're sticking with Quay. Like that could be a discussion. We don't know, but Campanelli could initiate that. Jeff Hafley could initiate that. He could go to Matt and say, hey, I want to make the move to go to somebody outside of Quay Walker. And if he makes that decision, my assumption would be that Matt LaFleur would say, okay, that's your call. You're the defensive coordinator. You have the ability to make that decision. I don't think he would overrule it. It's possible he could, but I don't think that he would. And then the third would be, even if Campanelli's like, nope, we still want Quay. Even if Jeff Hafley's like, nope, still want Quay. Matt could go and say, it's not Quay. You're going to make a change there. And I am mandating a change there. So that could be it too. The other thing, I mean, theoretically, I don't think it would ever get to this point. And my guess is if there's anybody that probably wants Quay to stay on the field, it is probably Brian Gutekunst, who spent a first-round draft pick on him, right? And probably wants to see him continue to try to progress. But there's always the ultimate too. This doesn't happen, and you don't want to see this happen because it would not be a good sign organizationally. But if Goody was committed and saying like, oh my God, this guy sucks, and the coaches were like, nope, we're going to keep starting him. We're going to keep starting him. That's our decision. Well, then, he could go all money ball and just be like, well, I cut Quay Walker, so you're not going to be able to start Quay Walker anymore. Like that's not going to happen. I'm not saying that, but that is one more option that is out there. Goody has full say over the 53-man roster. So Goody could just say, well, you're not going to be able to play him anymore because he's a free agent. We just waived him. Again, that's not going to happen. We don't want that to happen. That would be a breakdown in communication between Goody and the rest of the team. And you never want to get into that realm, but just theoretically, that would be one other way it could go down. But to me, this would probably be a Jeff Hafley decision at the end of the day, more often than not. Because even if Campanelli goes to him, it's going to be Hafley's decision. And if Hafley makes the decision, I don't see Matt LaFleur overruling him. I just don't think he would do it. I think he would give Hafley the autonomy to make that call. So to me, this is ultimately a Jeff Hafley decision. And but again, it could be Matt's if he wanted it to be. If Matt says enough of Quay, I'm done with it, then it's ultimately Matt's decision. But I think he'll lean on Jeff Hafley to make that decision. And I think ultimately it probably lays on his plate. I want to see Hendrickson force his way out of Cincy and see him come over to play in Green Bay. Not aware though on if Cincinnati plays a 3-4 or a 4-3. I just don't see any sort of major Hendrickson move in the offseason one way or the other. They'll be able to make some moves. I don't think we're going to see a massive splat. Like Hendrickson on the free agent market is going to go for bananas money. I mean, bananas money. I don't see Green Bay being able to match that, quite frankly. So either way, it's probably, regardless of everything else, it's just not going to happen. The three most important games remaining as I see it: Detroit win to build confidence versus San Francisco win to exercise demons, Minnesota because F the Vikings. Statistically, or at least per the New York Times simulator, San Francisco is the biggest game remaining when it comes to playoff probability. So if you want one win the remainder of the way, it would be San Francisco. And then, if this makes sense, if you really think about it, but the loss that actually hurts them the most from a playoff probability standpoint is actually New Orleans. And you think about it logically, right? New Orleans is the easiest game remaining on their schedule. So you really want to take advantage of that one. If you lose to New Orleans, now you still have every other hard team still remaining on your schedule. And now you picked up a loss against New Orleans. So technically, if you're looking at it statistically, San Francisco, New Orleans, really the two that you really want to make sure that you're picking up the remainder of the way. Don't do it, Andy. Consistency is king. I'm assuming you mean the mustache, the chin piercing in the hat. We'll see. Andy, thanks for everything you do. We haven't talked a whole lot about over the year about, let me start this over because apparently I can't read Nathan. Hey, Andy, thanks for everything you do. We haven't talked a whole lot about year-over-year improvements this season. Let's see. It's safe to say that we have a middle-of-the-pack defense and special teams, a lot fewer major red flags, in my opinion. Also, thanks for everything you do. I don't ever get to hop on live, but having Pack-A-Day has gotten me through a lot of rough moments. Thanks for carrying the G, Andy. Nathan, I appreciate that a ton. I hope those rough moments are past you. And I'm very glad to hear that Pack-A-Day was able to help you in some of those tough times. Those always mean the world to me. That means more than anything else, quite frankly, is just, if this can be a distraction from everyday life, guess what? This is a distraction for me from everyday life as well from time to time. So I totally get it. I understand it. And I'm glad that can be an out for everyone else. As far as, year-over-year improvements, if we just want to take a mid-year sort of look at it, I think it depends on how you want to look at it, right? So from an offensive standpoint, on the first half of the year, year over year, this year is better than last year, right? If you look at carrying it over from the second half of last season into the first half of this season, the first half is worse than the second half of last year. So if you had to rank them, second half of last year, first half of this year, first half of last year. So year over year in the same time period, better. Year over year where the offense ended last year, worse. Defensively, year over year, I'm still very much in the better category all the way around. I think better first half of the season, better second half of the season. I think I still trust this defense right now, even though they're coming off not a great game, right? I still trust this defense more than anything I saw in the Joe Barry like last season. So I'm still going better right now. Still probably, like you said, middle of the pack, right? But I still think better year over year. Special teams, I'm still more leaning towards better. Daniel Whelan's been great. Now, the field goal issue's been brutal, right? But I think the hope is that Brandon McManus is going to be able to sort of fix that the remainder of the year. Fingers crossed, not holding my breath, but at least there is a potential solution there. Kick returns have basically been taken out of the game. I'm not massively concerned. When Nixon has got it, he hasn't been able to do much with it. Punt returns have been okay, other than the couple failed attempts that they've had. But I think the special teams is a bit better year over year than where they were a season ago, and certainly coming off their best game in a long, long time against Chicago on Devin Hester nonetheless. So I will say offense somewhere in the middle, because they're better than they were in the first half, but worse than the second half. And then I think defense and special teams are just a bit better. As a team, sort of similar to the offense, right? I think they are worse than they were in better than they were in the first half of last season, worse than they were in the second half and in that playoff run. But I think there is a better outcome out there for this team. And I think they can be better than what they ended up with at the end of last season. Good question, though. When you get to 100,000 subs, will you commit to doing an ayahuasca retreat? I'll do something crazy. I don't think an ayahuasca retreat is what I want to do at all. Actually, no, I will guarantee I will not do that. I am not and this is not just to be like, look at me, I'm all clean. I will drink as many old fashions as you want to put in front of me. I'm not a drug guy, just not a drug guy. And it is not necessarily, it's not a moral thing. It's not a, look, I'm better than you thing. I just don't like how it affects me at all. I'm not into it. I like having control of my body. Like it's just a control thing. It's totally, completely transparent. That's why I don't like flying, because I don't feel like I'm in control, even though, of course, like, I don't know, how much are we ever really in control of anything? But you might say, well, why do you like alcohol then? You're not in control when you've had a bunch of alcohol. No, but you feel like you're in control when you've had a bunch of alcohol. You're definitely not, but you feel it. Any sort of drug use for me, I don't feel like I'm in control, and I hate that feeling more than anything. So like, I have like that feeling where there's like a foreign thing in my body, and I'm like, I can't stand it. I'm like, I like don't even want to be awake. I'm like, I want to go to sleep because I hate feeling this way. So like my skin is crawling just like thinking of it. So ayahuasca, any of that stuff, I'm probably all the way out on, but I will commit to doing something crazy if we get to 100K. We haven't talked a whole lot. We talked about this. Sorry about that. Sandy, thanks for being here. Do you think the Bears played that much better than the week before? Do you think the Packers play enabled the Bears to have more success? I think it's mostly totally honestly, I think it's more that the Bears played a lot better. I do think they played a much better brand of football than they did. I think they were motivated to beat Green Bay. I think they were motivated to put that 10-game losing streak of Green Bay behind them. I think they were motivated to get everyone to stop talking about how brutal of a franchise that they were. I think they were at home, new offensive coordinator, a little bit of momentum. I think Caleb Williams played one of his best games of the season. I think they not dumbed down, but just sort of watered down the offense and what they were asking him to do. But also when they asked him to do more, he came up with bigger plays. I think because, again, they were asking him to do things in smaller increments. Like, I just think it was a much better brand of football from Chicago. I think Green Bay played great. No question about it. I don't think it was as bad as it looked in real time, but it was not anywhere near their best game of football. But I give Chicago a lot of credit. They played a lot better than they did against Arizona or New England in the 2 previous weeks. Who are your 3 favorite Packers wide receivers in my lifetime? All right. The first one is controversial / it's complicated. I'm just going to go based on time in Green Bay. All right. Anything that happened post Green Bay, we can disregard, but in the moment, Greg Jennings is probably number 1 on that list for me. I loved watching Greg Jennings play football. I mean, absolutely loved. So he's probably top of that list. I had the Greg Jennings jersey. He was all in. Like, that was one of my favorite draft picks, and just how he performed. He was so fun to watch for me. Devontae Adams, very clearly on that list as well. Just watching him grow and just see him completely dominate the league and play at a different speed than everyone else, despite not having like the unbelievable speed, like that one for sure. And I just love watching his practice habits. So Greg Jennings and Devontae Adams are the 2 easy ones on that list. And then it gets a lot more complicated. to think about this a little bit more. There's a part of me that I think I know the answer. I'm just going through here, making sure. I'm going to go Sterling Sharp as my third. Yeah, I think that to me is number 3. I do hope he gets his Hall of Fame run. I was just watching some old highlights the other day again. There was somebody posted on Twitter like a random game where Anthony Dilwig came in and played quarterback, and just watching Sterling Sharp. I mean, prime Sterling Sharp was so freaking special. So I'm going to go Devontae Adams, Greg Jennings, and Sterling Sharp is probably my 3 favorites. Robert Brooks would be a close player in that too. Andy, did I not do something correctly? I submitted a super chat last night and a couple weeks ago for money, and they didn't get into the chat. I don't know. This one definitely did get into the chat, Donald. So I am so sorry if I missed anything on your end. Usually it's pretty easy to tell. So first of all, thank you even just for the thinking of it in previous ones, even if they didn't go through. If they did go through and I missed it, I am insanely apologetic for that. Usually I'm pretty good at going through and catching everything. And also the chat usually keeps me on my toes, where if there's a super chat and I missed it, usually the chat will be like, hey, you missed the super chat. So my apologies sincerely if I never got to it. You are incredible though. Thank you so much for the $50 super chat. That is beyond generous of you. Thanks for talking me off the ledge after the game Sunday in your response to a question on Cooper DeJean versus Jordan Morgan in round 1. I love your unique take on how a B offensive lineman can help more than an A cornerback over the long haul. Yeah. And again, it's not to sort of ultimate cope here, right, Donald? Like there's no question about it. Cooper DeJean would be a really nice player on this team right now. I just think more often than not, by taking the offensive lineman, you're setting yourself up for success in the long term. And like a good offensive lineman has so much value in this league. And again, time will tell of how good Jordan Morgan is. If he can end up being another Elton Jenkins-esque player, who Elton's never been a Pro Bowler, right? I don't think he's never been an All-Pro. He's just a really good, solid offensive lineman. If they get if Cooper DeJean becomes a 6-time Pro Bowl defensive back and Jordan Morgan is just another Elton Jenkins, give me the next Elton Jenkins. Like, I think that's how valuable offensive line play is in the NFL. Now, Jordan Morgan needs to play well. If Jordan Morgan is the next, what's a good example? I'm trying to think of an example of like a below average. Like if he's the next John Runyon Jr., that's probably a good example, right? And Cooper DeJean is like a 6-time Pro Bowl corner or defensive back. Give me the 6-time Pro Bowl defensive back, right? So a lot of this is going to still be dependent on just how good DeJean gets. If he becomes a Hall of Famer, well, then it's a different discussion. But right now, if DeJean just ends up being like a 2-3-time Pro Bowler and Jordan Morgan just becomes a really good, solid offensive lineman, I'm cool with taking the offensive lineman. That's going to pay huge dividends for you long term. But I appreciate the super chat a ton, Donald. Is trading Rasul for a 3 in retrospect Goody's worst mistake in the past 3 years? No. I mean, some of his draft picks in the first round that we just talked about, LVN's not looking great at the moment. Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker don't look great, right? So I would go far more of those. When you're evaluating a trade like that, you have to evaluate it really sort of in the moment. And to me at the moment, I could make total sense of it. Getting a top 100 draft pick, and I get you're saying here in retrospect, Donald, but getting a top 100 draft pick for a team that was 2-5 at the time, that showed no signs of really being a team that could compete at any sort of high level. And, I know they had to give up the 5th round pick in return, but also saving some money on Rasul Douglas. You guys know me. We talk all the time about windows when it comes to Super Bowl windows. Rasul Douglas had a 2-year remaining contract last year and then a remaining contract this year left. So a 2023 and a 2024 contract remaining. When they traded away Rasul Douglas, it was very difficult at that moment, 2-5 in 2023, to assume that within Rasul Douglas's timeline in Green Bay, meaning 2023 and 2024, that Green Bay was going to be able to make a Super Bowl run. It's just being real. They were 2-5. Jordan at that point was not the answer. They were not playing good football. They had lost 4 in a row I think 4 in a row, if I remember correctly. It just did not look like they were going to be a team that by the end of 2024 was going to be able to compete for a Super Bowl. Quite frankly, we still don't know if that's going to be the case, but it's in the conversation at least, right? So at that time, the remainder of his contract was only through 2024. You were able to pick up a top 100 pick in return, save salary cap space in the meantime. And the truth was Rasul Douglas at that moment did not seem to fit the current window that Green Bay was trying to open. The 3rd round pick very much would. The extra salary cap space very much would. So at the time, I wholeheartedly understood it. Even even with the benefit of hindsight, I don't think it's one of those deals that's like completely aged like milk. Would I prefer Rasul Douglas to be on this team right now? Hell yeah. Do I think he could have helped in 2023? Yes, but I can still understand why the decision was made at the time. I don't think it's this like, it's not like Rasul went out and has been like an all pro corner for Buffalo. He's still really good. I'd still like to have him, but I can understand it. And that's all I ever ask for. Like, I don't think people quite recognize like how hard this stuff actually is. How hard it is to get like you're making how many decisions on the year every single year. You're not going to shoot 100%. All I care for is that you are making that you have a plan, that you're making educated decisions at the time, and that I can understand why you would want to do something like that at the time. And I could. And again, could you make the argument that it would have been better to keep Rasul? Sure. No question about it. I'm not going to argue that or debate that in any way, shape, or form. But could I 1,000,000% understand at the time? And just quite frankly, not that this is the be all end all either, but if it were me at the time and I got that exact same trade offer, I would have absolutely taken it as well. So I could understand it. That's all I can ever ask for. What would you expect the Packers to go record-wise the remainder of the year? 6-2 is what. 6-2 was going into the Bears game, so 5-2 is what I'm hoping for. But second half of the season, my hope and prediction was 6-2 for the remainder of the year, and then playoffs just get in and see what happens, and then that's anyone's guess at that point. But so 5-2 the rest of the way in the regular season. Any suggestions or hidden gems for good eats in the Green Bay area? Going to be there all week for 2 games next week. That's awesome, man. I love Play Bistro. I really like Chives, although they are very much on the saltier side, but I love Chives still nonetheless. Blue in Green Bay is very good. Hinterland right across from the stadium, very good food. Those are some of my favorites that I enjoy going to. Rustique Pizzeria, great. Reuben, or not Reuben. It's like a Monte Cristo or something. I think it's that, something like that. This is a very good, no, Cuban, sorry, really good Cuban. And then phenomenal pizza. So there's a lot of really good options in Green Bay. Those are some of my favorites. C Street, if you want a late night dive bar at the end of the night to get a really good old fashioned at, that's one of my favorites. So yeah, definitely some good places. Darkness Retreat at 100K. I would like that probably more than the ayahuasca thing, but that still doesn't sound like fun either. But if we get to 100K, well, like I said, we'll do something. We'll do something for sure. Jordy, Tay, and Cobb. It's a good list. No problems with that, Ben. From the other day, the instant replay game was the Magic to Sharp game winner versus Chicago and Ditka that they had to check replay to see if Magic was past the line of scrimmage. I was watching a different one. It was a game where Anthony Dilwig came in and came in for Don Mikowski. Forget who they were playing against, but it was it was fun to watch just Sterling Sharp, and Dilwig made a couple crazy passes at the end of that game. They came back and won it, which was crazy, but just always fun going and seeing those old highlights. Don't know if you'll get this to this chat, but this has to be the most balanced roster in the past 3 years, right? Hard to find true roster holes. It can be. It can be. I think they need more from Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt on the interior defensive tackle. They need Jair to get back healthy in that cornerback spot. But yes, I think it absolutely can be the best, most balanced roster. 2021, when they had like Whitney Merciless and Zadarius Smith came back at the end of that year, like that might have been probably the most stacked team that I think they've had in recent memory. I think that was the best version of it in that game against San Francisco. They just played like crap in that game, which sucks. But I would probably go 2021 San Francisco, which I thought was the most balanced, best roster. But I will add this. The special teams was complete and utter crap, and it hurt them at the worst time. So yeah, I think you can make an argument that this has the ability to be the most balanced roster that they have. Pass rush has been subpar, yes, but not a whole. You want a better cornerback too, but so does 2/3 of the league. Kickers, TBD, starting linebacker was worse with Campbell. Can agree with most of that, Nathan. Think they can and will get more from Clark and Wyatt very soon. Fingers crossed. That'd be very, very nice. All right, friends, I've got to get out of here. Time to jump into the defensive tape, which I'll be able to talk a lot more about tomorrow on Pack-A-Day Live. Hope to see a lot of you guys there. We'll do the grades video as well. Should be up tomorrow. Paul Brettel already recorded with him for tomorrow, so that'll be up later today and for you guys as members. But again, that will be tomorrow's show, and then should be recording with Mike Wall tomorrow as well for Thursday's show. So lots of really fun stuff coming up. Happy hour will be on Thursday. Remember that. The one thing that's a little bit in flux right now might be the pregame show. We've got a couple conflicts that could come into play there. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do a pre or post game show on Sunday, but I'll keep you guys posted on that nonetheless. Appreciate you all a ton. Thank you so much for being members. I'll be back here again tomorrow on Pack-A-Day Live. So see you then. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.